Before we dive into today's topic, I want to tell you about something that's changed how I approach pigeon health and performance. I run another channel called Pigeon Healthy where I share natural herbal treatment methods that most fanciers have never heard of. We're talking about plants and natural remedies that have powerful healing and performance-enhancing effects on pigeons. Things like specific herb combinations that boost immunity, natural treatments for respiratory diseases, plants that improve digestion and recovery after races, and natural alternatives to chemical medications. We cover pigeon diseases you might be struggling with right now: canker, respiratory infections, coccidiosis, worms, and show you exactly how to treat them using natural methods that actually work. No guessing. No expensive medications with side effects. Just proven herbal protocols used by top European lofts. If you're serious about keeping your birds healthy naturally and improving their performance without chemicals, go subscribe to Pigeon Healthy right now. The knowledge there could save you birds, save you money, and give you an edge your competition doesn't have. Now let's get into today's topic. Tuesday morning. You have 10 young birds ready for training. They've been loft flying perfectly for 3 weeks. Strong flyers. Good trap discipline. Healthy. You're ready to start distance training. You take them 5 kilometers south. Perfect weather. Calm wind. Clear skies. You release them. All 10 return within 30 minutes. Excellent. You're encouraged. Your birds are strong. Thursday you decide to extend distance. 15 kilometers same direction. Good weather again. 9 birds return. 1 doesn't make it home. You're slightly concerned, but you tell yourself these things happen. Maybe a hawk. Maybe the bird got disoriented. 9 out of 10 is still 90% return rate. Not terrible for only second toss. The following Tuesday you train again. You want to push them further. They handled 15 kilometers reasonably well. You decide on 40 kilometers. This seems logical. They're young and strong. 40 kilometers isn't that far. Pigeons fly hundreds of kilometers in races. You release all 9 remaining birds at 40 kilometers. You wait. 1 hour passes. 2 hours. 3 hours. Finally, after 4 hours, 3 birds return. They're exhausted. Barely able to land. They sit on the landing board for several minutes before entering the trap. Over the next 2 days, 1 more bird returns. Total 4 out of 9. 5 birds lost. 55% loss rate from a single training toss. You're devastated. What went wrong? The weather was good. The direction was familiar. Why did so many birds fail? The answer is you just made deadly training mistake number 1. Too far too fast. You jumped from 15 kilometers to 40 kilometers. That's a 267% increase in distance in one jump. Your bird's cardiovascular systems, navigation abilities, and mental confidence couldn't handle that massive increase. You didn't train them. You broke them. Those 5 birds that didn't return aren't lost because they're weak or stupid. They're lost because you pushed them far beyond their current capability. Some are dead from exhaustion. Others landed somewhere and couldn't figure out how to get home from that unfamiliar distance. Others got so exhausted they became vulnerable to predators. All of them failed because you failed to progress distance appropriately. This scenario with different specific numbers happens constantly. Fanciers jump distances too aggressively. They think bigger jumps save time. They think strong young birds can handle it. They're wrong. The birds pay the price with their lives. Today I'm teaching you the 3 deadly training mistakes that kill more birds than disease, more than hawks, more than bad genetics. These mistakes are completely preventable. Every bird lost to these mistakes is a bird that could have lived and raced successfully if the fancier had trained correctly. Let's break down each mistake in detail, starting with the one that kills most birds: excessive distance progression. Deadly mistake number 1 is increasing training distance too fast. The rule that prevents this mistake is simple. Never increase distance more than 30% from one toss to the next. 30% is maximum safe increase. 20% is better. Conservative fanciers use 15% increases. Let me show you what proper progression looks like. Toss 1 is 5 kilometers, 30% of 5 is 1.5. Toss 2 should be 6.5 kilometers maximum. Round to 7 kilometers for practical purposes. Toss 3, 30% of 7 is 2.1. Maximum distance is 9 kilometers. Toss 4, 30% of 9 is 2.7. Maximum distance is 12 kilometers. Toss 5, maximum 16 kilometers. Toss 6, maximum 21 kilometers. Toss 7, maximum 27 kilometers. Toss 8, maximum 35 kilometers. Notice it takes 8 tosses to reach 35 kilometers following 30% rule. Many fanciers try to reach this distance in 3 or 4 tosses. They jump from 5 to 15 to 35. This kills birds. The 30% rule accounts for the physiological adaptation time birds need. Every training toss stresses multiple systems. Cardiovascular system learns to supply oxygen more efficiently. Muscles develop more mitochondria for energy production. Liver and other organs learn to process metabolic byproducts faster. Navigation systems in the brain strengthen neural pathways. All of these adaptations take time. 48 to 96 hours minimum. If you toss again before adaptation occurs, you're not training, you're damaging. The 30% rule ensures each new distance is challenging enough to stimulate adaptation but not so challenging that it overwhelms the bird's current capacity. Think of it like weight training for humans. If you can bench press 50 kilograms and you try to jump immediately to 100 kilograms, you'll injure yourself. The muscles aren't ready. But if you increase to 55 kilograms, train at that weight until adapted, then increase to 60 kilograms, you progress safely. Your muscles grow stronger gradually without injury. Same principle applies to training pigeons. Gradual progressive overload builds capacity safely. Aggressive jumps cause breakdown and loss. I know the objection. This conservative approach takes too long. Following 30% rule means 8 tosses to reach 35 kilometers. That's 8 weeks if you toss once per week. Racing season doesn't give you that much time. You need birds ready faster. This thinking is why fanciers lose birds. You can't rush physiological adaptation. If racing season starts before your birds are ready, you race them at the distances they're ready for. You don't skip steps and hope they survive. Most won't. Better to race conservatively at distances you know birds can handle than push them beyond capacity and lose them. One bird that survives conservative training and races successfully is worth more than 10 birds you lost pushing too hard too fast. European champions follow the 30% rule or even more conservative. They don't care if reaching race distances takes 3 months. They'd rather take the time and have healthy prepared birds than rush and lose birds. Joss Thone trained young birds for an entire season before racing them. 4 months of training building from 5 kilometers to race distances. His loss rate during training was under 5%. American fanciers often lose 30 to 50% of young birds during training by rushing. The European approach takes patience but it works. The American approach seems efficient but it's actually incredibly wasteful. You're buying or breeding birds then killing them through bad training before they ever get to race. That's not efficiency. That's stupidity. Deadly mistake number 2 is training in conditions harder than typical race conditions. This kills birds through cumulative damage that doesn't show immediately. Many fanciers think training in difficult conditions builds toughness. Train in wind. Train in rain. Train in heat. Then race conditions will seem easy. This logic is backwards and dangerous. Birds don't become tougher from training in harsh conditions. They become damaged. Here's why. Training tosses should be teaching experiences where birds learn navigation and build confidence. If every training toss is a brutal struggle against wind or weather, birds learn that returning home is incredibly difficult and painful. This creates psychological trauma. Birds become reluctant to leave the loft. They're afraid of the struggle they associate with flying. Worse, training in harsh conditions causes physical damage. Rack-ing in strong headwind requires 2 to 3 times more energy than racing in calm conditions. The bird must work dramatically harder for every kilometer covered. This extreme effort depletes energy stores, damages muscle tissue, stresses the cardiovascular system, and exhausts the bird. If this happens occasionally in actual races, birds can recover. If it happens repeatedly in training, the damage accumulates. Birds become chronically fatigued. Their immune systems weaken. They develop injuries. They stop performing well not because they're weak but because you've systematically broken them down through over-challenging training. The correct approach is training only in conditions equal to or better than average race conditions. If average race conditions in your region involve light wind of 5 to 10 km per hour, train in conditions with 5 to 10 km per hour wind or less. Never train in 20 or 30 km per hour wind just because that day is convenient for you. Wait for better weather. If average race conditions are clear skies with occasional light rain, train in clear skies. Don't train in heavy rain or storms thinking this will toughen birds. It won't. It will damage them. The only exception to this rule is late-season training for experienced birds. Once birds have completed full season of successful racing, 1 or 2 challenging condition tosses might be appropriate to test and slightly extend their abilities. But never for young birds or early season. Always train in conditions better than what you expect in races. Belgian masters are famous for canceling training tosses because conditions aren't perfect. They'll plan a toss, drive to the release point, evaluate weather, decide conditions are slightly too challenging and not release. They drive home with birds still in baskets. American fanciers often think this is excessive caution. They release anyway. They lose birds. The Belgians don't lose birds. Who is right? Training isn't about testing birds to their maximum. That's what races are for. Training is about building capacity safely and teaching navigation clearly. Both goals require good conditions. Poor conditions impair learning and risk damage. There's no benefit to training in poor conditions. Only risk. Let me give specific weather thresholds for safe training. Wind should be less than 15 kilometers per hour at release point. Use wind forecast tools to verify. If wind is stronger, postpone the toss. Temperature should be moderate, between 10 and 25 degrees Celsius. Extreme cold below 5 degrees or extreme heat above 30 degrees adds physiological stress that impairs learning. Visibility should be good, at least 5 kilometers. Don't train in fog or heavy haze. Birds need visual landmarks for navigation learning. Rain should be absent or very light. A few drops is fine. Steady rain or heavy showers is postponement. These thresholds ensure training conditions support learning and adaptation without adding unnecessary stress or danger. Deadly mistake number 3 is insufficient rest between training tosses. This is the mistake that creates chronically fatigued birds that underperform despite having good genetics and proper training progression. The physiological reality is every training toss depletes energy stores, creates muscle microtrauma, stresses the cardiovascular system, and triggers immune responses to manage inflammation. All of these processes require time to resolve. Energy stores must be replenished through eating and rest. Muscle microtrauma must be repaired through protein synthesis. Cardiovascular adaptations must be consolidated through rest. Immune responses must complete and return to baseline. Minimum time for all this recovery is 48 hours. For longer or harder tosses, 72 to 96 hours is better. If you train again before recovery is complete, the bird starts the new training session in a deficit. It hasn't fully recovered from the previous session. Now it's accumulating new fatigue on top of unresolved old fatigue. Do this repeatedly and you create cumulative fatigue where the bird is in a constant state of deficit. Energy stores never fully replenish. Muscle damage never fully repairs. Inflammation becomes chronic. Immune function stays suppressed. The bird appears healthy superficially, but it's operating at 60 or 70% of capacity because it's chronically fatigued. Performance in training and racing is mediocre not because the bird lacks ability but because it's never allowed to fully recover and perform at actual capacity. The solution is discipline about rest days. Minimum 2 full days between training tosses. For young birds or longer tosses over 15 kilometers, 3 days is better. This doesn't mean doing nothing for 3 days. Birds should have normal loft flying and normal daily care. But no training tosses. No long flights. Just rest and recovery. This rest period allows complete physiological recovery. By the time you toss again, the bird is fully recovered and adapted from the previous toss. Now the new toss stimulates further adaptation from a recovered baseline. This is how you actually build capacity. Progressive overload applied to recovered systems creates adaptation. Progressive overload applied to fatigued systems creates breakdown. Many American fanciers train too frequently. Monday toss, Wednesday toss, Friday toss, Sunday race. That's 4 challenging efforts in 1 week with only 1 or 2 days between each. The birds never fully recover. By Sunday race they're already fatigued before they even start. European champions typically train once per week or even every 10 days during season. Monday toss, wait a full week or more, then next toss. Between tosses, birds do normal loft flying but no distance work. This gives full recovery time. The birds arrive at each training session fresh and adapted. They progressively get stronger because they're actually recovering between sessions. They arrive at races fully recovered and ready to perform at capacity. The exception is late season when birds are fully conditioned. At that point, slightly higher frequency might be tolerable. Maybe 1 longer training toss and 1 shorter toss in the same week. But this is only appropriate for birds that have completed full training progression and have race experience. Young birds or early season training must be conservative frequency. Better to undertrain than overtrain. Undertrained birds might underperform slightly but they're healthy and can improve with more training. Overtrained birds are damaged, sick, and might never recover. The risk profile is clear. Conservative frequency is always safer. Now let me teach you how to recognize signs that your birds are overtrained or that training is too aggressive. Recognition allows you to adjust before serious damage occurs. Sign 1 is declining trap times. If birds' trap entry times are getting slower rather than faster as training progresses, they're fatigued or traumatized. Healthy progressing birds should trap faster each week as confidence builds. Slowing trap times indicate something is wrong. Sign 2 is weight loss despite adequate feeding. Birds in proper training maintain or slightly gain weight as they develop muscle. Birds in overaggressive training lose weight because they're burning more energy than they can consume. Weekly weighing reveals this. Any bird losing more than 5% body weight over a training period is being pushed too hard. Sign 3 is increased respiratory rate at rest. Healthy birds have quiet, effortless breathing when resting in the loft. Birds that are stressed from training show increased breathing rate even at rest. The cardiovascular system is struggling to keep up with demands. Sign 4 is reduced enthusiasm for loft flying. Birds that love flying will loft fly voluntarily 30 to 60 minutes per day. Birds that associate flying with painful training experiences become reluctant to fly voluntarily. If your bird's voluntary loft flying duration decreases as training progresses, they're being traumatized. Sign 5 is increased illness rates. Overtrained birds have suppressed immune function. They catch respiratory infections, develop canker, get coccidiosis. If multiple birds in your training team are getting sick, training stress is likely the root cause. If you see any of these signs, stop distance training immediately. Give birds full rest for 1 to 2 weeks. Allow complete recovery. Then restart training at lower distance with more conservative progression. The damage from overtraining can be reversed with adequate rest. But it requires actual rest, not just slightly reduced training. Full cessation of training stress allows recovery systems to catch up. Once birds show recovery, weight restored, breathing normalized, enthusiasm returned, you can resume training at appropriate level. Let me give you the practical training schedule that prevents all 3 deadly mistakes. This is the schedule that produces 95% or better return rates during training. Week 1, 5 kilometers, perfect weather only, midweek toss, 2-3 days before next toss. Week 2, 7 kilometers, perfect weather, same distance twice if any bird struggled first time. Week 3, 9 to 10 kilometers, perfect weather. Week 4, 12 to 13 kilometers. Week 5, 16 to 17 kilometers. Week 6, 20 to 22 kilometers. Week 7, 27 to 29 kilometers. Week 8, 35 to 37 kilometers. Week 9, 45 to 48 kilometers. Week 10, 60 to 65 kilometers. Notice several things about this schedule. Distance increases are always under 30%. Weather is never compromised. There are consistent rest days between tosses. Some distances are repeated if needed. The progression takes 10 weeks to reach 65 kilometers. Many fanciers want to reach this distance in 4 or 5 weeks. Those fanciers lose birds. This conservative schedule doesn't lose birds. By week 10, the surviving birds are thoroughly prepared, confident, and healthy. They race successfully because they've been trained correctly. Another advantage of this schedule is it naturally selects the best birds. Birds that can't keep up with even this conservative progression eliminate themselves by not returning from training. These birds have genetic or health problems that would prevent successful racing anyway. Better to identify them in training under controlled conditions than lose them in races. The birds that complete this 10-week progression are proven capable. They have the genetics, health, and mental capacity for racing. These are the birds worth racing and breeding from. Now let me address the emotional difficulty of losing birds in training. Every bird lost is disappointing. You raised it, trained it, had hopes for it. Losing birds hurts. But there's a critical distinction between losses you could prevent and losses you couldn't. Losing birds because you trained too aggressively is preventable loss. That's your fault. Those birds could have lived if you trained correctly. Losing birds despite conservative training is usually unavoidable. Some birds have genetic defects. Some have undiagnosed health problems. Some have navigation deficits. These birds would fail eventually regardless of how carefully you train them. Losing these birds isn't your fault. It's natural selection. The goal is 0 preventable losses and accepting minimal unavoidable losses. If you follow the training schedule I outlined and you still lose 5 to 10% of birds, that's acceptable. Those birds probably couldn't succeed anyway. But if you lose 30, 40, 50% of birds, you're creating preventable losses through bad training. That's not selection. That's slaughter. Take responsibility for preventable losses. Adjust your training to prevent them. Accept unavoidable losses without guilt. Focus on the birds that succeed. If this video showed you that your training protocol is killing birds you could have saved, hit the like button. Subscribe for training protocols that build champions instead of destroying them. Comment overtraining if you've lost birds by pushing too hard too fast. And visit Pigeon Healthy for overtraining recovery protocols. Birds that survived overaggressive training have stress systems needing support. Natural herbs help restore immune function, repair tissue damage, and rebuild depleted birds. Training correctly prevents damage. Natural support heals damage already done. Use both approaches for maximum success. See you in next video.